All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about what Shawn Porter had to say about the ERROL Spence Jr. Terence Crawford fight and a warning to Terence Crawford and others about comparing his fight with Terence to his fight with ERROL Spence Jr. Said the same thing ain't going to work on ERROL. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we are again talking about the biggest topic in boxing, the best fight that can be made in boxing between two of the best fighters in the world. The #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, in my book, Terence Bud Crawford, versus the #1 welterweight in the world, in my book, ERROL Spence Jr., a fight that hopefully will be negotiated soon. And Shawn Porter, a common opponent for both of them, had something very interesting to say about the fight in response to questions about him. Now, before I get into that, though, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you're a longtime subscriber, regular viewer of the channel, thank you so much for your support of the channel. Really has grown a lot, and that is because of you guys, your constant support for the channel. So thank you very, very much. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Now, if you're new to the channel, first time coming through, you're not subscribed, please accept my invitation to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. We really do have great boxing conversations that go on here. For example, with this particular topic with ERROL Spence Jr. or Terence Crawford, you can believe Terence Crawford's going to win. We'll have a good time talking about it. If you think ERROL Spence Jr. is going to win, we're going to have a good time talking about it, because at the end of the day, man, it's all about the boxing conversations, and we have those every day from in live stream formats and in the videos. So definitely check us out. Hit that subscribe button. All right, so let's get into this. Shawn Porter, who is a former WBA and former WBC and a former IBF welterweight champion, who has been in the ring with both ERROL Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford, gave some information in response to some questions that came to him on his podcast that we're going to talk about, and I think are very, very, very illuminating, and points that people should definitely remember. And pretty much says this, the question was, what do you think about people saying that because Terence Crawford beat you more easily than ERROL Spence Jr. beat you, that is going to mean something and relate something to into the fight that takes place between the two of them? Do you think that you are the litmus test for those guys in that sense? Now, what Shawn Porter said was 100%, I do believe, very consistent with everything that I've ever heard people say about that. And it's essentially, look, man, first of all, triangle series do not work. Just because this guy beats this guy and that guy beats that guy doesn't mean this guy's going to beat that guy, right? So specifically, what he said was, look, I'm not the same fighter as ERROL Spence Jr. When I fought ERROL Spence, there were certain things that I had to plan for with ERROL Spence. When we fought Terence Crawford, we had to think about planning for a couple more things, but we had a game plan for Terence Crawford, and it was two separate things, as they're two different fighters. And he said with Terence Crawford cannot fight ERROL Spence Jr. the same way that he would fight me, because I'm not the same type of fighter. I'm not the same fighter as ERROL Spence Jr. So no, Terence Crawford, the fact that Terence Crawford knocked me out, and I'm just filling in the sentences for him because the commentators were being polite about it. Shawn Porter was, being a little bit, I don't want to say he's being circumspect, but, just being a little bit indirect with it. But Shawn, pretty much what he communicated was, look, man, if Terence Crawford thinks that ERROL Spence Jr. is me and prepares for that way, that's not going to work for Terence, because I am not the same fighter as ERROL Spence Jr. And the same way, and I don't think anybody would say would say the same thing about ERROL preparing for Shawn like like he would prepare for Terence Crawford. Now, also something I want to say about Shawn Porter and what he's in the face of all of these like what a lot of people are running with off of this Hall of Fame conversations about what James Toney said when James Toney said Errol Spence Jr. won't last 6 rounds with Terence Crawford. And then, Roy Jones Jr. said, if Errol can hang with him over the first 6 rounds, then we may have a good fight. But if he's hurt from his car accident, then, we don't know. Look, man, Shawn Porter, I do believe, is a little bit more like together with it. Now, I think that Shawn Porter still may favor Terence Crawford in the fight by a little bit, but the guy has been in the ring, and I do think that is fair to say. When you've been in the ring, you've literally been in this ring with the same 2 people and saying, look, man, I may edge this guy a little bit, but actually giving these dudes respect. That Shawn Porter now, by comparison, because there's a lot of Errol Spence Jr. fans that thought, Shawn Porter was just hating on Errol. I personally think that Shawn likes Terence Crawford more because they consider themselves to be friends. However, I don't think that and I do believe he's a little bit delusional about having won that fight with Errol. I ain't with that, man. Good fight, but at the end of the day, I think Errol got it. But despite that, he's not anywhere near out there on a limb like James Toney saying that Errol's not going to go 6 rounds with Terence Crawford. That to me is when people are just going overboard, and they're just talking. And no disrespect to James Toney, man. James Toney is a really great fighter, without a doubt, one of my favorite fighters of the century and latter part of the 1990s for sure. But James Toney is known for extremes, man. James Toney is known for, if you ask James Toney something, James Toney ain't missing words. He's not going to be halfway. He's not Mr. Lukewarm. He's either going to be all the way hot or he's going to be all the way cold. If he's going to win, he's going to destroy, he's going to crush, all of that stuff. And I think that's what he's doing with that Errol Spence thing. And honestly, the whole idea that Errol would have a problem for the first 6 rounds, to me, is absolutely backwards in the way that I see the fight. I would see the fight taking place. I would see Errol being stronger in the first 6 rounds than Terence Crawford, and Terence trying to wait for Errol to slow down or try to find some type of hole in Errol's game, and then being able to take advantage of that after 6 rounds. But if they just think like that's just me seeing somebody that's not watching. Now, also, when Roy Jones Jr. said what he said, he was like, he was specifically asked, what about, when James Toney says that he won't make it out of 6 rounds, that's what Roy Jones Jr. is responding to. So when Roy says, well, yeah, if he's not together for the accident, if he's not together after the accident, there's some lingering thing from the accident, then yeah, man, he could be in trouble. But if he can hang with him early, then we may have a good fight, right? Which is him still saying that he believes Terence Crawford will win the fight, but he's answering a question from Roy about what James Toney had to say. So I had heard, Roy Jones Sr. say, yeah, he's a bad boy. Terence Crawford's a bad boy, but Errol Spence Jr. is a pressure cooker. If Errol can last over the 6 rounds, dog, it may be a good fight going on in that second half, right? Because the pressure, he's basically saying the longer the fight goes, the better it is for Errol. And I think Terence Crawford does better in the second half of fights than in first half of the fights, and is a slow starter. But Shawn Porter, 100% right in saying, man, you can't compare these 2 fights. You can't compare me as a fighter to Errol Spence Jr. because it's just a different situation altogether. And main reason I think that's the case is because Errol doesn't have those flaws that Shawn Porter has, and it's just going to be what it is. If Errol had knocked out Shawn Porter in the 3rd round and Terence Crawford went the distance with him, I still would say the same thing. Those triangle theories do not work. And a perfect example of a triangle theory theories not working is Ali, Foreman, and Frazier. Muhammad Ali lost to Frazier. And by the way, he also lost to Ken Norton. And then George Foreman knocked out Kenny Norton and knocked out Joe Frazier. So obviously, George Foreman should knock out Muhammad Ali, right? No, Ali knocks out Foreman. So triangle theory goes bust. But anyway, That's you let me know. That's all I got to say about the situation. Please, in the conversation, in the comment section, please let me know what you think. It would be greatly appreciated. And with that, I'm out. Peace.